Hey everybody, I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country. We're doing a very special tribute to Ernest Tubb tonight, and I'm very pleased to have this gentleman on the show. He is a steel guitar Hall of Famer and worked as Ernest Tubb's Texas Troubadours for many years, and he's won the Living Legend Award from the Steel Guitar Association in Nashville, and played with Wanda Jackson and Charlie Louvin, Billy Walker, Webb Pierce, Stonewall Jackson, and of course became a member of the Texas Troubadours in 1974 playing steel guitar. And he's going to share some great stories with us tonight. It's an honor to have Lynn Owsley on My Kind of Country. Lynn, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm just wonderful. So good to hear from you.
Well, it's good.
We kind of walking on air down here in Nashville from celebrating Ernest Tubb's birthday. That has been all kind of festivities and celebrations for the gentleman, and I think that's just great. For somebody that's 108 years old and still to be remembered like that is one of the greatest.
Absolutely. Well, we're carrying that on tonight too and paying tribute to Ernest, and I'm so glad that you're with us. And we've had a chance, you and I, to meet a few times down in Nashville. We always have a good time, and I really appreciate you taking the time tonight. Well, I want to ask you, before we start talking about Ernest, Lynn, tell me a little bit about how you got started playing steel guitar.
Well, I was in a musical family, I guess, and from the wilds of Alabama down there, if you didn't entertain yourself, you didn't get entertained. You had to learn something. My dad was a fiddle and guitar player. My granddaddy was a fiddle player, and my brother a guitar player, and kind of all of us did something except me. And I was left-handed, so I just couldn't get the movements to play those instruments because all of them were right-handed. And Daddy had an old dobro, a national Giulioli dobro with one of them resonators is silver, and I drag that thing around and to just turn it around backward on my lap and try to play it, with the wrong hands. And my granddad and dad got together and they got me a little fiddle, and they reversed the strings on the fiddle, put them on backward and turned the bridge around and moved the sound post and the bass bar inside the fiddle and put it all back together and made me a left-handed instrument.
Wow.
And I became a fiddle player and started working professional, if you can call it that. When I was about 12 years old, I was playing square dances and things. And I got to see that people enjoyed it, and I liked what I did, and I made $1 or $2 here and there. And so music just kind of became part of the life. But I always liked going back to that old dobro, playing that thing backwards. So when I was about 16, I got a double neck, 6-string Supro steel guitar. And I was playing it left-handed, just turn it around because there wasn't no pedals on them back then. I just sit on the other side of it. And I put the picks on my left fingers and use the bar with my right hand. And I did that for a time, and I wanted to buy me a professional guitar. And Shaw Jackson told me, he said, son, he said, if I build you this left-handed guitar, you're going to be locked into it. And he said, you'll never be able to play anybody else's instrument. And it's very expensive to build it backward. It was almost double the cost because they had to set up all the mills and machineries backwards, mirror image. So he taught me into taking a right-handed guitar. And he told me, he said, if you're determined, you'll be playing this thing in a matter of weeks. And that's kind of what I did. It's a right-handed world, but I managed to overcome that and became somewhat of a steel guitar player, and that's kind of my story. I moved here to Nashville in the '60s, kind of really by mistake. I I never thought I was good enough to be here, and I come here for a weekend visit, and I'm still here.
That's great. Well, you played for some pretty big names, Wanda Jackson and Charlie Leuven, Billy Walker, Webb Pierce, and Stonewall Jackson. Before this is all before Ernest, right?
Yeah, all that before Ernest, and I got to. I did some dates with Lefty Frizzell, and he was one of my heroes. And looking back on it, I think that I was probably all Lefty could find at that time, because I was not a what you'd call the steel player that he needed. Steel guitar players were. There were a time that pedal steel players were rare,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it was hard for them to find a musician that could do that. And so I kind of got in on them, the pioneering of the pedal guitar.
So how did you come to meet Ernest Tubb and go on the road with him?
Well, back in the old days, I met Ernest in Alabama when I was a kid. And I can't say that I knew him, but I met him when I was about 16. And I met him the very week that he quit smoking and drinking both. I met him right around Christmas, and the first of that year would be 1967, I guess, is when he quit some of his vices. But I had a job in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on Old Highway 90 before the interstate, and the Troubadours coming from Nashville to Texas, they worked Texas 2 or 3 times a month sometimes, and they were up and down that highway. And they'd generally come through where I was down there late at night, and they were traveling east and west up and down 90, and they would always stop in with us. So I got to know Jack Green and Buddy Charleston and Jack Drake, some of the guys, and not really Ernest that much. And then they recommended me for a job up here with Stonewall. And so I moved on to Nashville, and then in 71 or 72, Ernest's wife, Ms. Lynn Tubb, when Ernest was on the road and out of town, if they had a guest host on the Midnight Jamboree that did not have a band, a single guest host, and they had a lot of, like Billy Walker, he didn't always carry a band, and Charlie Walker and folks like that, the medium-sized stars, Ms. Tubb would get me to put a band together and do the Midnight Jamboree live. And I'd put the band together for the artists that she had guest hosting. And so I could do that and work the nightclubs too. And I was generally around on the street, so sometimes Ms. Tubb would call me at noon on Saturday and say, "Can you have me a band at the record shop tonight at midnight for Ernie Ashworth?" And I'd say, "Sure," because I liked the money. It didn't pay no big money, but it was right there where I was, and I could do it fairly easy. And a lot of times I just get musicians just go into Tootsie's and see who's sitting on a bar stool and if they got a guitar in the car. And we would put on shows, and we did that. So I got to know Ernest through that. And Buddy Charlton was leaving in 73. So when Buddy Charlton left, Don Helms was telling Ernest, Don gave me a real nice recommendation and compliment. Don told Ernest, he said, you ought to think about taking Lynn and the Troubadours. And that's exactly what happened. I became a Texas Troubadour through the good graces of Don Helms.
How long did you stay with Ernest?
I worked with Ernest from 73 until he died. He died in 84. So I had there was a brief part in a year, and part of 79, part of 80, that I went with Cal Smith and took a different jobs. And I needed to get off the road, and I got an ulcer, and I was sick. I needed time to get well, and the way Ernest worked, I didn't have time to recoup.
Yeah.
So Johnny Cox, the one we called Dumpling, a great player, he always wanted to be a Texas Troubadour, and he was with Cal Smith and the Country Bumpkins. And, you know, I told you earlier that we kind of had a family bunch, and we were interchangeable. So I knew Cal's show pretty well, and Johnny Cox knew our show pretty well. We just swapped positions, and after about a year, we swapped back. So I come back with Ernest and stayed with him to the end. But then I stayed with Justin. As a troubadour, I've got, I don't know for sure, but better than 20 years. And 11 of it was with Ernest.
Now, Ernest really worked the road hard. He played a lot of dates, and he maintained that up until his last year. So what was it like being out on the road and doing so many dates like that?
Well, it was work, but it was also something we loved. And I had a family, and I used to take my kids with me sometime. Well, I couldn't regularly, all the time, but on special occasions. And I was talking about this yesterday. When I first got married, the year I got married, which was 1976, I was a single guy the other years. And the day that I got married, Ernest was my best man, by the way. And we had that early in the day, and we had a matinee on the Grand Ole Opry. And then we had 2 evening shows on the Opry, and then we had the Midnight Jamboree to work. All this was on my wedding day. And then I had to do an interview at Tootsie's in the mid-afternoon for a Alabama radio thing. Jack Green and I were on that. So I had a really busy day, and my wife, she had a busy day with family and friends, but I had to work, and here I'm my new groom, and I took her with me on some of it, and then she met me back at the Midnight Jamboree on Broadway. Well, anyhow, we were leaving that night for a 33-day trip all the way to the West Coast and back. I was on the road 302 days. Out of 365, I was on the road 302 of them. Now, we didn't work 302 working days. We had 270 working days, but I was gone 302 days. Now, that was my first year of being married. And when we pulled out of the Midnight Jamboree on Broadway that night, we loaded the buses, and I was in the front seat, and here's Jack Green and my new bride and Jack's wife, Jeannie Seeley. She is down there, and just as we got on the bus there on the sidewalk in front of the Ernest Tubb record shop, Jack was going to give me a little bit of his philosophy, and he was hugging my wife, and he said, "Now, Lynn, when you work for Ernest Tubb, you give your heart and soul to country music, and you better give your wife to me." and we had to pull out, and I'm waving goodbye, and it was 33 days before I saw her again. I have to go through the whole 33 days without seeing my new bride.
That is hardcore right there, I'll tell you what.
Well, see, I'm just telling you one story. There's a bunch of troubadours, and that's kind of some of the things that we have sacrificed to do other things that we loved, and making the music and being a part of that family was also just a great part of my life, and I feel like I'm most richly blessed.
One of the things that I noticed all through the years with Ernest's sound is he never changed his sound. It always stayed very much the same, as did his road show. And when different musicians would come in, and obviously that's going to make some changes. as far as the whole dynamic of the band, but the sound always stayed the same. What was Ernest's stipulation for playing songs out on the road?
Well, Ernest was not a stickler on that. Ernest kind of left that up to us, and it kind of became a part of history and tradition. So whoever was coming on, a new member of the band or whatever, just the old Troubadour just made them realize right up front, this is what we do. And Ernest would allow us a lot of freedom. But when he sang, when he's out there, he wanted it back, we were back to three chords and the truth. And even playing a solo, he'd look around and smile at me, and he'd say, "Stick to the melody, son. You'll be all right." And something like that. And we could play some wild stuff in the solos, but when it come time for him to sing again, we calmed it back down and tried not to play over none of his lines, so that the story he's telling gets out there. Yeah. And we would kind of do this, Scott. Playing a steel guitar is a lead instrument, the fiddle, guitar, whatever, piano. When the singer sings a line, your fills should be like punctuation marks in the English language, for instance. If you got something you want to call attention to, you put in quotation marks, and with a steel guitar, it'd be something to draw attention to that particular line. And if you think of it in those terms, we were pretty good at what we did.
You told me a story about, we were talking about the Green Hornet bus when I saw you at Music City Bar and Grill one time, and you said you actually won that in a poker game one time. Tell me about the famous Ernest Tubb poker games.
The poker game, well, we had a lot of time on the road, riding up and down them roads between shows, and we'd entertain ourselves, and we all liked to play poker. So we had some poker games over the years and over the years I've played poker with some mighty famous people. And Ernest loved to play cards, and we were frequent visitors to Las Vegas to work, but our pastime and amusement would be playing poker or whatever. And we got into a crap game, shooting dice. This wasn't poker. We got to shooting dice, and it was somewhere up in New England, Northeast. And we were going into Owsley, New York for a Sunday. And we didn't have to work. We were off that day. And I don't remember where we were coming from, but we were shooting dice. And I got lucky, and I won pretty much all the money on that bus. I was a happy camper. And we get into Owsley, New York, and we had rooms, and it's snowing. It was in a kind of a snowstorm. And we kept shooting dice. They had rooms in the hotel. We was sitting right there in front of the hotel. We was on the bus shooting dice, and the driver went on to his room, and the snow was piling up around those engines. The engines got to have air to stay cool, and the driver kept having to come down to the bus, and he'd tell us, "Y'all go to bed." We was up all night shooting dice, and so the driver had to come down with a shovel and dig the engines out where they could get air and breathe, and he was complaining that was hoot boarding. He wanted us to go to bed. And I got to loaning Ernest money. I'd lend him money back because he'd loan me money when we were playing cards. If I needed it, if they broke me, he'd give me money. So I had all the money this day, and I was loaning Ernest money. Don't get me wrong, he was like my daddy, but I had to do this. So after I loaned him a lot of dollars, and every time I let him have money, he'd throw it out on the table and grab him, I said, Ernest, you taught me better than this. I can't be making these unsecured loans. I've got to have some security. And he had this big old ET ring, gold and diamonds. He said, well, what do you let me have on this ring? And I said, I don't need no jewelry, Ernest. And he said, well, how about my guitar? I said, no. He said, well, here, let me have $1,000. I said, no, I can't do that. And he said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, get the title and the papers for this bus. I'll let you have some money on this bus. And we got the driver and got the title and got witnesses, and I loaned him money on the bus. Long story short, before we went to bed that day, the bus was mine. I owned it. And it's sitting in a museum right here in Nashville today. But he got the bus back in about 2 weeks. He won it back. But I did own it for a couple of weeks. And when we replaced that bus in '78, Hoop Board and I suggested that we put it on display and let our fans visit and see how we lived. So Ernest gave the bus to me and Hoop Borden, and we put it on display for many years out there, a free display. We had it in front of Loretta Lynn's Western Wear log house, and Ernest had a record shop next door, and we left the bus there for people to go through. And it after Ernest died, there's nobody taking care of it, and it became dilapidated, and people would take pieces of it with them, souvenirs. And we come up with the idea, none of us had the money, we come up with the idea of having the bus refurbished, completely redone, repainted and all that, and putting it inside as a free attraction. So we didn't have the money to do that, so we had some charity benefits to raise money, and David McCormick, the owner of the record shops and Ernest's partner, David was a big part of this, and he got it completely rebuilt, so the bus actually kind of belongs to history. Mm-hmm. It kind of belongs to the fans and to history nowadays, but I can't say that I did own it for a time.
One more story I wanted to ask you about. You were talking about this on the Midnight Jamboree, was when Roger Miller came and pitched Ernest some songs. Tell me that story, would you?
Roger and Justin Tubb, Ernest's son, were good friends. And Roger being a songwriter and fiddle guitar player, and Roger was working some with some of the other artists of the day. He was trying to get a foothold in Nashville. Justin got him an appointment with Ernest at Ernest's office there in the record shop. Roger come in to the office there with Ernest, and he got out his guitar and he had his songs on a notebook paper. Anyhow, he did the "You Can't Roller Skate" and "The Buffalo Herd," and dang me, and Ernest just ended the interview, and he said, Roger, I'm not going to be cutting nothing about roller skating with Buffalo, and I won't be recording nothing about dang me, they ought to take a rope and hang me. When you get something you think that I could use, you come back, son. And Ernest stood up. Roger put his guitar in the case, and when he walked out the door, there's a trash can by the desk. He just dropped his song folio right over in the top of that trash can and went out the door. And Ernest got up. He was about to leave, and he happened to notice the boy's songs, and he realized that he had hurt his feelings, and he looked down, and the first thing he saw on top was, "Now, I don't love you like I used to do, but I'm afraid to tell you so." Ernest got it out and was reading it, and he went up front to the front of the store, and he asked the clerk, said, "Where'd that boy go?" And she said, "He crossed the street and went into Tootsie's over yonder." And Ernest said, y'all get somebody over there and get him and bring him back. And he got Roger back, and he said, sing me this right here. And Roger sung him Half a Mind, a little bit of it. And it wasn't complete. And so Ernest asked him, he said, well, why didn't you show me that? And when you were over here a while ago. And Roger said, well, I hadn't finished it. And well, Ernest put the pen to it, and Ernest wrote the last verse of, now time will prove that you're not to, time may prove that you're not to blame. But now's the time I need to know. I've got half a mind to leave you, but only half the heart to go. Ernest wrote that.
Oh, okay.
And he never took her credit for it. It was always Roger's song. And in about 8 or 9 weeks' time, that song was in the top 5 in the nation.
Wow.
And it became standard and is today. So that's kind of the story of that. And then Roger Miller, he became what he was, and a great songwriter and a great entertainer. And Ernest kind of helped out a little bit with that.
Well, of all of Ernest's songs that you played out on the road for so many years, what are some of the songs that really stand out that are favorites for you?
He could get to me with a lot of them. Let's Say Goodbye, like they said, Hello. That was kind of one of my favorite special songs. We'll Say Something Nice to Sarah that we talked about. That was one of the special ones. And when Ernest would do Soldier's Last Letter, people asked for it, and Soldier's Last Letter was written by Red Stewart, and Ernest did a part of the writing, but it was Red's idea. And that became a World War II standard, and it's kind of a sad song, but it tells a great story.
All right. Well, Lynn, thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us on the show tonight. And it's been an honor talking with you, and I'm very proud that you took time to be on My Kind of Country.
Well, thank you, Scott, and I'm looking forward to seeing you when you get back down here. Chances are I ain't going to be up that way, but when you come back, be sure and holler at us.
You bet I will. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Well, thank you, and thank you for carrying on that country music for us.
You got it.
Bye-bye.
I don't love you like I used to do, but I'm afraid to tell you so. I've got half a mind to leave you, but only half the heart to go. Words to tell you just don't come to me. Yes, my courage is too slow. I've got half a mind to leave you, but only half the heart to go. Oh, Lynn, Owsley. I'll play it pretty, Lynn. Now time may prove that you're not to blame, but now's the time I need to know. me.